say this right now. Vontaze Burfict is a really talented football player. I don't take that away from him. There was a reason that the Cincinnati Bengals held on to him for so long. It wasn't because he was a headhunter. He is a talented football player. He went undrafted simply because of his conduct issues, not because of him as a football player. He's a very talented football player at Arizona State. But Vontaze Burfict, whatever is inside of his heart and his soul, is absolutely just too evil to be in this NFL, because that was absolutely uncalled for, the hit itself. And, you know, the Oakland Raiders, to me, they kind of had us fooled on this situation, because when they were going through their drama with Antonio Brown and the situation that occurred between him and Mike Mayock, we heard that Vontaze Burfict was one of the main people who was playing the role of a good Samaritan and telling Antonio Brown to calm down and holding him back during what almost turned into a physical altercation with Mike Mayock. Then they named this guy the team captain. So, to me, that may have put some people in the mindset of, you know what, maybe this guy is turning a new leaf. He didn't get to play in the NFL last year, and it's nothing like when you have your livelihood taken away from you. So you thought, okay, he didn't get to play in the NFL last year. Maybe he's been humbled to a degree. Maybe he's ready to come back and strictly be a football player. And then you have something like what occurred yesterday. And I want to halfway applaud the NFL for what they did today, because, yes, Vontaze Burfict should be suspended for the remainder of the season, which he is. But to me, he should be banned for life, because it's not necessarily because of the hit itself. It's because of his reaction to the hit. There's no remorse for that whatsoever, and it really came off as, I'd do that all over again if I had a chance to. And if the NFL allows this guy to come back in and the team signs that, he's eventually going to go out here and really hurt someone. And then the NFL is going to have a whole new problem on their hand with lawsuits from that player who gets injured. The floor is yours.
Well, you know, you do make some pretty interesting points. And let me start off with this, Xavier. You're talking about this NFL. I don't think there's any doubt, believe it or not, his behavior really wouldn't be looked upon back in, again, the days when I was in it in the 70s and the 80s. Because, first of all, had he have been going through all this sort of thing, Dick Butkus would have beat the living daylights out of this guy and a lot of the other physical players. He doesn't get away with half the stuff that he is getting with now in today's game. But you're also talking about a league that has allowed Richie Incognito to stay in it and not go away. You follow what I'm saying? So you're talking about the old bullies.
To be on the same team as well.
Exactly. But, you know, Richie Incognito is one of the biggest basket cases that I've ever seen. And he's still playing in this league. Obviously, he's talented, and he's had more chances and more had lives, and that's 9, so it seems like. So, but, yeah, Vontaze Burfict not showing any remorse and really applauding what he did, to me, tells me that this guy needs to seek anger management. But we're talking about a league that also had Greg Hardy in the league as well. You know, and he stayed around for a while until he got banished as well. You follow me? So there's a there's a pattern here when you're dealing with these clowns. There really is. Now, I remember a guy, which you do too, his name is Ndamukong Suh. I remember the Thanksgiving game against the Packers, how he stepped on Rodgers and he got ejected from the game. I think he was suspended for a couple of games. But the thing about Ndamukong Suh, it seemed like him and Jim Schwartz were always in their principal's office all the time. And, you know, they were able to talk to Goodell. And at some point or another, Ndamukong Suh is such a smart businessman, and he figured it out. You know why? He didn't want to lose a lot of money.
I'm going to say this because he understood that his livelihood was on the line.
Exactly. That's my point. Finances. You're talking about Ndamukong Suh, who left the Detroit Lions to go to the Miami Dolphins. Although that didn't work out, probably got some financial lessons from Stephen Ross, who unquestionably is one of the biggest financial geniuses on the planet. And so Ndamukong Suh probably picked his brain about great investments. I can see a guy like Ndamukong Suh being extremely successful in business after his time is up in the game. But he figured it out that it was getting expensive not to play in games. But yet he gave the Lions a pretty good, reputation in terms of being a tough, nasty team, an identity that this team never had. But Vontaze Burfict, when will this guy ever get it figured out? Never. Never. And I'm actually surprised at some point or another that nobody ever tried to go ahead and take a chop block out to knock this guy out for good. Because if he ever does come back, you want to talk about a bullseye in somebody's chest, Vontaze Burfict will definitely have it. He really will. The guy, obviously he came into the league because of attitude issues. And it seems like if you can play in this league, then they'll try to overlook it. But at some point or another, you're going to run out of opportunities as well. And he deserves the year-long suspension. We'll see whether he gets it figured out going into next year. Because the NFL's been known to give zillions of chances to players that have probably run out of them. They definitely have tried. But this guy is a very bizarre character. He really is. And I know that the Oakland Raiders have been known to take on problem children over the years. They always have when it came to the leftovers and all that. You follow what I mean?
Well, of course.
I mean, that's the nature of this franchise. So, yeah, I don't know. Vontaze Burfict deserves to get sat. And to think that the Raiders had Brown and Burfict on the team and now they're both gone. But yet, I got to tell you, I'm still hoping the Raiders do well because they'll have enough strong of a foundation between John Gruden and Mike Mayock that they'll still be able to find good players anyways. I really do. They're probably relish the underdog role.
Well, they definitely have a chance to still overachieve this year or to prove some of their naysayers wrong because, like you said, they have a very talented team. And, now you can officially basically eliminate the Denver Broncos from the equation of actually being competitive in that division because they are now 0-4 and they lost Bradley Chubb to a torn ACL on yesterday. So that is going to hurt a defense that was already struggling anyway. So I believe that's a team that you can now eliminate from the equation there. Joe Flacco is not the problem. Surprisingly, he's not the issue there. The defense has been awful, and that's the biggest question mark of them all because Vic Fangio is a defensive genius, and you just can't point out what's really going on right now. Von Miller hasn't looked like Von Miller all year there. Bradley Chubb tore his ACL yesterday. Chris Harris is not the same lockdown corner that he once was. They just have a lot of issues there. So I believe that this is a three-team race in the AFC West between the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Chargers. So, we'll just have to see how that plays out. But as far as Vontaze Burfict goes, you're absolutely right. He's never going to learn his lesson. This is a repeat offender. We know about his incidents there. But here's where I'm really surprised that the Bengals held on to him. Anyway, Scott, let's go back to that playoff game against the Pittsburgh Steelers 2015-16 season where he inadvertently just took out Antonio Brown. And we know that Antonio Brown's had his issues for the past 2 years now that we at least know about. Now we're hearing stories that this was actually going on longer. But we can only go based off of this pattern of erratic behavior that we saw for the past 2 years. No one deserves to get hit like that, and he's a defenseless receiver coming across the middle. But let's talk about what the other issue with him doing that was, besides him taking a dirty cheap shot. The Cincinnati Bengals had a chance to win that playoff game. And because Vontaze Burfict could not contain himself and because he could not control himself, he cost his team a playoff game or a playoff victory because of penalty yardage. So that's why I was really even surprised that they held on to him that long. Because not only for taking a dirty shot, but for flat out being stupid enough to not be able to control yourself and to hurt your team as a whole.
Well, but you're talking, Xavier, about a team that held on to Adam Pac-Man Jones for a long time despite his criminal history. So, the Cincinnati Bengals was one of those last chance or you hit the road, and they didn't have choir boys on that team either. And Adam Pac-Man Jones stayed around longer because of the organization stood behind the guy. But yeah, you're right. Now, let me ask you a hypothetical question, okay? Let's just say that that he didn't commit that foul and they win a playoff game. Do you still think that Marvin Lewis is the head coach of that Bengals team?
Absolutely.
Do you
because
really?
He would have had the playoff win under his belt. And the Cincinnati Bengals are a team that is not used to having any type of levels of postseason success unless it's the 1980s.
Right, that's true. Well, you remember that far back when Kenny Anderson was the quarterback for Cincinnati, or are you doing a heck of a lot of homework to bring up that?
Heck of a lot of homework, because not just Kenny Anderson, you have to go to Boomer Esiason
Exactly.
as well.
Yeah.
That was the only winning decade that the Cincinnati Bengals ever had. After that, it was nothing. And it's a huge disappointment in that when you really think about some of those teams that Marvin Lewis had. I know that people like to rib on Carson Palmer a lot. Listen, before Carson Palmer's torn ACL, he was on his way to being one of the premier quarterbacks in the league. Chad Ochocinco Johnson, despite the antics, he was one of the better wide receivers in the league. TJ Houshmandzadeh was a nice complimentary wide receiver. Before the horrific tragedy that happened to Chris Henry back in the 2009 season, God rest his soul, he was a nice complimentary piece for that team. They had a nice defense that they were putting together. Marvin Lewis was a defensive background of a coach. They had good offensive coordinators like Jay Gruden.
Right.
So, they had the chances there to have some form of success, but they didn't. And when you're on the cusp of it and you lose out because of something like that, there's no way I would hang on to a guy like that.
Yeah, well, that's true. They did let a lot go, but I do think that the one thing that definitely made it hard for Marvin Lewis to keep his job was when he got to the playoffs, he couldn't even win a game. I mean, think about this for a second, Xavier. Even Tim Tebow won a playoff game. Tim Tebow, dude. Tim Tebow won a playoff game. Now, I'm not going to get into a Tim Tebow discussion, but with all due respect, I think Marvin Lewis is a great coach. I actually am glad that he landed with Herman Edwards over at Arizona State University, so that those guys who are exemplary role models can teach the young kids how to play. Now, I will say this, though. I'm glad that Ndamukong Suh has been able to keep his career going, and he's actually playing at a decent level. Ironically, on a day when Vontaze Burfict got blown out of the league, it was Ndamukong Suh that scored a touchdown for the Tampa Bay Bucks against his old team, the Rams. It was like, in your face for letting me go, but he's actually still resurrected his career with the Buccaneers. So I would like to see Ndamukong Suh have continued, sustained success. I really, really would. And, again, he's had a really good career for himself. So let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs for a moment. Then I want to steer over to Minshew Mania while we have another 15 minutes or so. Were you impressed with what you saw with the Chiefs yesterday, or do you feel that they dodged a bullet?
I feel that they dodged a bullet, but I was impressed with the fact that Patrick Mahomes was able to lead that team down the field, and he didn't even have his best day. And, I'm not even going to blame Patrick Mahomes for that, because I know a lot of people want to look at the fact, this guy didn't have a touchdown yesterday. Did we watch Sammy Watkins yesterday? Did we watch all the mistakes that he made yesterday? That's absolutely uncalled for. It's unacceptable. And it was one of those days yesterday where I said a Chiefs offense that doesn't necessarily need Tyreek Hill. Well, they needed Tyreek Hill yesterday, because Tyreek Hill wouldn't be making those types of mistakes. And the types of mistakes that we saw Sammy Watkins make yesterday in crucial time is exactly why he ended up not lasting in Buffalo, and he ended up not lasting with the Los Angeles Rams. But I was very impressed with the Kansas City Chiefs offense. Defensively was a day where I looked at it and said the same thing that I said about the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday night. These teams need to do what they need to do to go acquire Jalen Ramsey, because I know that he may not necessarily be the